Oh, I must mention this is for educational purposes only. So Daniel, if you're watching, mate, please don't strike my channel. Right, let's continue.
Mary Mellon and others. Um,
Yeah.
she was good friends with Gurdjieff and Carl Jung and all that. They that's what the whole family lore that yes, Paul Mellon and Mary Mellon were going to Switzerland to meet with Carl Jung because of her asthma. Yeah, that was one side of it. The other side of it was like, holy shit, you over here the Germans are the Tula Society is warming up. Paul Mellon was Scroll and Key at Yale. Scroll and Key and Skull and Bones are directly related to the Tula Society.
Yes.
Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, it's good that John mentioned about the Tula Society. There's different pronunciations for it. Thule Society, because there's Thule. Some people say it's Thule, but it's not. The real pronunciation for the Tula Society is Tula Gesellschaft. Now, Gesellschaft means association or organization, and that's what the real pronunciation for the Tula Society is. Just a brief background for what the Tula Society is. It was founded in 1918 in Munich. And if I remember rightly, it was mostly politicians, people high up in politics that really wanted to reform Germany back into its original Germanic roots. Obviously, we're talking about the Aryan race here, but because the Germans believed that they were the descendants of the Aryan race, the superior, blonde hair, blue-eyed, gorgeous women and all that, which links into the Vril Society, which I'll allude to a bit later. So you had like politicians like Rudolf von Bodendorf, Karl Haushofer, Dietrich Eckart. You also have Rudolf Hess, and also claims of Hitler as well, because at this time in 1918, I believe the German Workers' Party started, and that's where Hitler really got his foot into politics and sort of skyrocketed from there. And also Dietrich Eckart's, I think it was Dietrich Eckart's journals, and it found out that he wanted to bring Hitler as a new charismatic leader and some other like weird spooky stuff. It's quite fascinating really, because it gets into quite esoteric sort of stuff. But that's what the Tula Society was. It was just to bring, it's like a secret club that wanted to bring Germany back into its original roots, and also to think this was the end of the World War One, and Germany was obviously, with the Treaty of Versailles, was in a terrible state, especially on from 1918. Obviously, because they lost World War One, and they had to repay back all the money, which was basically billions. And it ended up putting Germany into a deep depression, and yeah, it was a pretty bad state. But yeah, you started it, so let's continue.
That could be proven in so many ways by various books and things, but it's come on, it all.
Yeah, so he's mentioning about Skull and Bones, which is the secret society linked into the Tula Gesellschaft Society, which I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you.
All makes sense. They were talking about other things when they were there.
Oh, before I'm gonna show you the symbol, the logo, because there's a real organization. Let's bring up the original one. Let's have a look. Okay, so this is the symbol of the Tula Gesellschaft. This is 1919, but the organization was started up a year before that. And you can see the swastika, which was pretty much a prominent symbol going back into the late 18th century to early 19th century as a good luck symbol. But I believe the Germans flipped it to resemble something else. It's a fascinating symbol. Nevertheless, it goes back into the Hindu religion, so that's how far back it goes to. So yeah, this is the Tula Gesellschaft. This is the symbol that the organization used. Let's continue.
My mother says they were reluctant to talk about some of the Carl Jung stuff, and I think early on, Paul, even before he was in the army and the OSS, he might have been in. He was Scroll and Key was a secret society. He might have been privy to some roundtable. Indeed, it would make sense to me, even before he went into the army. because he knew Donovan and Patton and General Marshall intimately.
Can you recall that story again where he mentioned to you about observing the German technology there and what he saw?
And he said, I saw all that rockets and
I've got the Queen, late Queen, and obviously Maggie Thatcher at the back there. So they're going to allude to the German flying saucers, this is the episode I'm going to be talking about. We're going to go into a bit of a deep dive today.
Television guide did. He said he saw Rheinmetall's, cannons.
Okay, sorry for stopping, but John just mentioned television guided missiles. Now that's very interesting that his father witnessed this, because near the end of the war, the Germans were still bombing England at the time, from 44. And there were the V2 rockets that they were sending over Germany to England to bomb London and Bristol and various places. Some of them were unexploded, and what the English were done were retrieve it. And what they found out, at the tips of these rockets, they found these little black boxes in there, and they took it apart, and it turns out it was a bloody camera. So these were the first television guided missiles, and they were sending them from Germany to England. And it's interesting that John's father witnessed this, because it's actually true. I only found that out about a few years ago. I was astonished by this. Think, bloody hell, television guided cameras in 1944. Blimey.
But he essentially saw the German saucer.
He did. He said he saw a large disc-shaped aircraft. He said it was at least 100 meters, maybe 150 millimeters in diameter. That's big.
Okay, well, first of all, that's a Calvine UFO. Some speculation whether or not that's an reflection from a water on the river or lake. Also, the new speculation now, it might be some sort of military aerogel device, sort of like a target practice, if I got that information right. Or is an actual real extraterrestrial flying saucer or flying craft as such. So, yeah, I'm going to I think what John's father is alluding to is possibly the Haunebu, but let's continue.
100 meters is a football field.
Yeah, it's big.
150 meters is a football field and a half. This must have been one hell of a big hangar. He said it was underground. But at the time, I thought, the Germans, they were just working on something else crazy. It was nothing. This was 1985.
Mm-hmm.
No one had been talking about the Wunderwaffe, at least very little, until Igor Wachowski and Nick Cook.
That's right. Yeah.
In 2002, I think, came out with it. If someone did before that, I don't know about it. I'm sure someone out there might know.
I think this is where I step in. Right, okay. What John's alluding to here, John, son, who's in the video, is that his father witnessed what he thinks is what I think is the Haunebu. So let's bring up a photograph of the Haunebu, because I guarantee. Let's have a little look. Let's have a little look. Let's have a bit of fun. If you've been in ufology for about 5 years and you heard about Nazi flying saucers, I guarantee you've seen a photograph like this. This is called the Haunebu. They allegedly had 3 prototypes of this, the Haunebu 1, 2, and 3. All serve different purposes. And also you had the drill craft as well. If you've been following my work, I mostly discredit this, because my estimation, if I did build these prototypes and the first one, the Haunebu 1, was from 1939. So you had all that time to build all these prototypes and then not show it, or there will be some sort of public eyewitness of these flying craft. And there is from declassified CIA documents. However, you must take these with a bit of a pinch of salt, really, because there will be some sort of remnants during the war of these flying saucers. And these photographs I'm going to show you here. Well, first of all, it looks like a brim of a hat. And you can see you got the gun turret underneath it. This is the dead giveaway of the Haunebu. They're good photographs, don't get me wrong, but bear in mind, Billy Meyer did good photographs as well. Well, it's been since the 70s. So yeah, looking about 50 years on, and they look crap now. But regardless, I mean, that looks supposed to be inside one of these flying craft, but this is the typical one you may find. Let's zoom in a little bit. So here we have like a brim of a hat. And bear in mind, you must take this into consideration as well. This looks just like the George Adamski flying saucer. And the timeline of this is 45 years after the war. Okay. So I think as I'm on this topic now, I think we should go into a bit of detail into the history of the Haunebu flying saucers and the rail and all that. I'm just going to allude to it just a bit. I'm not going to go into like massive amounts of detail. That's for another episode. But the esoteric side, which is this side of the flying saucers, the Nazi flying saucers, is quite prevalent in ufology at the moment. And I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything like that, but I've done quite a lot of research into it. And I'm going to show you a video of my selection of books. I'm going to grab this up now. 2 seconds. Okay, right. So this is my collection of books that is on the Nazi flying saucer project during World War II. Let's move this along here. Play. I hope this plays smoothly. So this is just a handful of them that I can fit on my desk. Okay. And these books are not cheap either. I'm going to allude to this book quite a bit because this is where a lot of the Nazi legend come from, the UFO Nazi flying saucer legends come from. So all these books here is all to do with research. And that book there, Graham Randall, fantastic book on Foo Fighters. So it's to do with Foo Fighters, the flying disc, the turbine-driven aircraft disc by the Shriever and Hubbard Moore, and Giuseppe Belluzzo and Richard Methe, around about in the early 40s. You have the esoteric side as well. On top of that, you have, like I said, the Foo Fighters and the Bell Project. So there's a whole mixture of everything. And that book there is what John's talking about, Nick Cook's book called Hunt for Zero Point, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, tell you what. Let's talk about the Bell Project first, because John did allude to it. Before I talk about the Haunebu, I just want to go back to what John was talking about here. Nick Cook's book and Igor Wachowski. Now, they dealt with what was called Die Glocke, the Bell Project, which was completely different to what the Haunebu was. The Die Glocke, let's bring up a photograph. And we've all known about the Die Glocke. But I would honestly say, just be really careful of what information you come across, especially the History Channel, because they are probably one of the worst information when it comes to anything Nazi flying saucers. So this is just an artist's impression of what the Bell looked like. That's probably a bit too big because the device itself was a whole new way of making, I would say, anti-gravity. This was the anti-gravity device, or one method of it, because I'm sort of ruling out Haunebu flying saucers at the moment, but I might change my mind because I'm going to show you a photograph that might be the actual real Haunebu. But this here is the Die Glocke. So this was about 13 feet wide. No, sorry, about 15 feet wide and to 19 foot high. And this was powered by globs of electricity that would be going in from the top. And inside these cylinders here would be 2 barrels. And inside these barrels will be like a red mercury-based plasma. The name of the actual serum, it's just slipped my mind. I'll have to refresh my memory when it comes to this information. But there'll be 2 barrels in here with a red mercury-based plasma, and they'll counter-rotate each other, almost like a Victor Schauberger torsion physics. But that Victor Schauber had nothing to do with this. But the idea of the method of you're spinning, counter-rotating, and you're pumping this with globs of electricity, enough power to power Berlin, because we know that because where this device was allegedly tested, according to Igor Wachowski, it was in the Henge. And the Henge had an actual power plant that was feeding into this sort of the Henge area. So the device was powered by probably millions of volts, absolutely, probably hundreds of millions of volts. And whilst rotating the mercury-based plasma, apparently it has some very strange effects that would happen. Because if you look into Igor Wachowski's book called, let's bring it up here. Put me on full our screen. Let's put me on there. Okay, so Igor Wachowski's book. Well, it came out in the early 90s, and it was a selection of books that came out that dealt with various weaponry to do with the Germans. You can see here you had the rockets and the turbo jet engines and stuff like that. And near the end, he found out about the Bell Project, and this is in the early 90s. And he wrote a book called The Truth of the Wunderwaffe, which is like the miracle weapon systems. And he's actually got some pretty good documents in here to actually back up some sort of device being tested. There's some like background radiation when the device was turned on. It was turned on underground first, and then it was tested, believed to be outside near the end of the war. So who knows where this device was actually ended up going to. But in here, if you can get this book, Igor Wachowski's book, Truth of the Wunderwaffe. I like it because it's got the word waffle at the end of it. But yeah, very, very good book. Quite lengthy book as well. And also, John mentions this book. Nick Cook's book, Hunt for Zero Point. This came out in, I think it was early, so 2001 this book came out. And it talks about the Bell Project, the Die Glocke, and also mentions about the Tula Society as well. And it does a brief mention of the video I'm working on at the moment, which is the turbine-driven aircraft that was developed in the 40s. These were like disc-shaped. Let's bring up like a little, see that there. So these were sort of turbine-driven aircraft that was developed in the early 40s to 45. Now, it makes no sense because if they were developing these turbine-driven aircraft in from 41 to 45, and they had these anti-gravity flying saucers, what's the point of putting money into this project? You know what I mean? So, but it alludes to the Rudolf Schriever, Otto Huber more, but this is for a later episode that I'm working on. It's also taken a lot of my time. But yeah, that is the Bell Project. So those two books, which I just mentioned, if you want some more information or a deep dive into the Bell Project, Igor Wachowski's book called The Truth of the Wunderwaffe. I think that's how you pronounce it. Right, E-tight, me all lovers. This book here, I'm going to show you. Now, this is a PDF file. Let's bring this up. Because this book pretty much starts the Nazi flying saucer legend to a certain degree. Now, this is quite a controversial book. Let's see what I like here. Okay, let's thin me down a little bit. There we go. So this book came out in 1970. Oh, 2 seconds. Okay. So this book here, which I have a reprint of, it's from 2008. I can bring it up. Yeah, okay. So this is a reprint of this book here, okay? This is an original from 1974. Remember that, 1974. This is talking about Nazi flying saucers. It's not the flying saucers I'm going to be talking about in a minute, because this reprint in 2008 added extra information, which we're talking about the Haunebu. So let's go through like a timeline of where these saucers come from. So let's bring it up a bit bigger. And let's go through this book. Okay, Nazi flying saucers. No, sorry, Nancy UFO Nancy secret weapon. Right, this is what it's called. Okay, from Ernest Zudel, controversial figure. He had a book publishing company in Canada, and this is his self-written book, and is claiming that the Germans had like a colony in Antarctica This is where the story more or less was originated from. He also goes into a bit of detail into the Nazi flying saucers. Now, this is the turbine-driven aircraft for this section of the book, and he mixes in Victor Schauberger, which he had nothing to do with the Bell Project or any flying saucer program. Yes, he built the Repulsion, which was a circular disc-shaped craft, but there is no information that he was alluded to any types of flying saucer program in the 40s. And in here, I must mention that Ernest Udall was arrested in Canada many times because he also was a Holocaust denier as well. So should I trust a Holocaust denier? And this is his book here. Take it with a very pinch of salt, guys. But in this book, talks about Antarctica. I think there's a lot of bullshit. I'm not going to go through it. I mean, you can get it if you want to. It's called Nazi Secret Weapons. You can get this reprint because the old book which is here in the PDF, is about over 200 quid online. I'm not spending that money to get this book when I can get a PDF of it here. So in here, it talks about the various sort of weaponry. Let's just go by the pictures here. I don't want to go through all through this book. It talks about the secret weapons in here. I mean, okay, yeah, they did develop stuff that was extraordinary. So sun cannons, Panama box, wherever that is. I mean, feel free to pause if you want to, but let's get down to the flying saucers because we need to have a look at this. So here's the Antarctica stuff. The camera up, it's near the end here. Right, okay, here we are. Scooby-Doo. Okay, this is Victor Schauberger. And this is where that story originated from. Let's going to scroll back up to see. Okay, no, I'm fine. Right. Okay. So here is Victor Schauberger's Repulsion. You can see the actual device itself. It's in oh bloody hell, where is it? It was in Austria. He's an Austrian philosopher, naturalist, and he was an inventor as well that created this almost smokeless engine that uses torsion physics, almost like a tornado, or how it sort of spins all the way down. It's quite fascinating. I need to dedicate an episode onto this because Victor Schauberger gets, again, here we go. Here we bloody go. See what I mean? It's what frustrates me, guys, is because once you go through all these books, you can put the puzzle pieces together. And this is what I'm finding. I'm finding all these publishing companies that put these books out. It's full of misinformation. It's putting bits and pieces of a multi-layer conspiracy and adding it together. It's like, no, it had like really nothing to do with it. I might be wrong. I might eat my words out. But from the research I've done, I can honestly say Victor Schauberger had nothing to do with this. This is just, I mean, yeah, that's this device that was developed in the 30s, but come on, these are photographs from UFOs. Photographs from the book here I can find. But anyway, let's scroll down. God, there's more stuff. Yeah, okay. This is the start, my friend. Okay. Right, the turbine-driven aircraft it came out in the 1950s through three engineers actually. The first one was from, let's bring up. Oh, we're going to go on a deep dive today. Ooh, let's do this. German flying saucers. Right. We're going to do this, guys. We're going to see how long we're going to go. Okay, let's get rid of that. And I'm going to show you where the first public report of this turbine-driven aircraft that was developed by German engineers in the early 40s. Okay, this newspaper was from an Italian newspaper called Giornale d'Italia from the 25th of March, 1950. And in this article here, you had an Italian engineer called Giuseppe Belluzzo, which he's a real person. You can find a Wikipedia page on him. And he was a Senate and politician for the Mussolini regime because he was an Italian. And I believe he won a reward in 1899 for his hydraulic turbine engine that he developed. So he had an engineering background in Milan in the early 1910s. And in here, what Giuseppe Belluzzo is describing, there he is, that's Giuseppe Belluzzo. So that's him. That's an actual real picture of him. And in here, he's mentioning that he didn't build the flying saucer. Now there was some not reports, there's some books I have saying that he actually ended up working on a program, but judging by this article, he stated that he designed the propulsion system, which is all to do with rotation. Okay, I have bloody no idea what this is. I might have to get Jeremy Reeves from Alien Scientists to discuss what this is. But the idea of these piston-driven disc-shaped aircraft is all to do with rotation. So he designed it and then gave it to the Germans, which the Germans then perfected. Okay, so that is from 25th of March 1950 from this guy here, Giuseppe Belluzzo. All right, and here's another picture of him. So 5 days after Giuseppe reports came out, Rudolf Schriever, a German engineer, came forward in a German newspaper called Der Spiegel on the 30th of March 1950. So 5 days in between Giuseppe Belluzzo's accounts that he came forward with. And in here, this is what he designed and built. So Rudolf Schriever gained his engineering degree from the University of Prague, age 30. He ended up working for the Heinkel factory, which this were basically a company that built like jet and turbine aircraft. Actually, it was the first turbojet aircraft company to actually build these sort of new advanced propulsion systems. And Ernest Heinkel, who was the chairman of the Heinkel factory, was interested in Rudolf Schriever, which I do have him here. So that's Rudolf Schriever. And he was interested in vertical landing and takeoff. And the idea of this sort of saucer shaped is that the fact that, runways were quite long and you'll have to get a build, with planes, you'll have to get a build up for it to actually take off. So this idea here is that you can actually, you don't need the runway because this can take off vertically. So you're minimizing the amount of, runway you actually have in. So this was just a prototype stage, first of all. And Rudolf Schriever did a small model, first of all, in 1940. And then, according to the books here, he mentioned that Ernest Heinkel gave him the go-ahead to actually build a full-scale model. So from 1941, this is an artist's impression. I don't think this is Rudolf Schriever's drawing per se, but this is like an artist's impression. So the idea is, let's just zoom in a little bit. So first of all, this was a central cockpit, the person standing up, which kind of makes no sense. Okay. But the idea, you've got a plexiglass dome, and surrounding the exterior portion of the cockpit, you have this rotating fan, and the fans will more or less move up and down to give vertical takeoff. And right down here, you see here, that is the jets to push the craft forward. And you have some bumpers underneath for it to actually land. And right here, and this is what's powering the fan going around the cockpit. Now, these were apparently Junker or BMW rockets that were developed at the time. So you had this whole craft that was more or less a whole new design, really. And this was perfected in the 50s by the Americans and stuff like that, which I can do another episode on. So this is the basic concept, the first model that was built. This was a turbine-driven aircraft. And this is from the test flight was in 1941. Because if you go back to the original report saying that the first flying saucer, the flying disc, I should say, not flying saucer, flying disc was flown in 1941. So that is the first public reports of German flying saucers. There's Rudolf Schriever. So yeah, here again, that sort of concept has been taken up later on. We're going to be talking about this guy, because that guy there, ladies and gentlemen, may have taken a photograph of an actual anti-gravity flying saucer, which I'm going to show you a bit later. And yes, an anti-flying saucer. Yeah, this is the Heinkel. This was the, oh God, drops my memory, but these were the Heinkel factory turbo jet engines that was Schriever was part of, based on the Quanda effect. So I don't want to go into too much detail because that's for another episode. So let's go look into the other turbine-driven aircraft that was developed, because this is the first part of the Nazi flying saucer program. Okay, I just want to allude to it just a bit. I don't want to go into much detail because I want to go to need to dedicate a whole episode to it. Okay, going back to Nazi secret weapons book, which is here. This is what you see in there. This is the Model 1. This is the Schriever model I just shown you, okay? Looks a little bit different, okay? You've got this big exhaust here, which you actually had the small jets on the sides. So this artist impression is a bit different. Bear in mind, the person who wrote this book was also a Holocaust denier, so never forget that. Again, this is just a better artist impression. So you see they've got the jet engines pushing the blade around, and you've got the thrusters here. Just going to skip through these a bit. Again, the Schriever disc. That's the jet engine that was possibly used for the disc. Okay, also you need to mention with these turbine-driven aircraft, there were 3 models built. That flying saucer I just showed you there, that flying disc, that was the Model 1. And after Model 1, apparently it was a bit of a failure because it didn't perform, the flight characteristics didn't fly that well. So eventually you had more engineers went on to the project to help Schriever build a new disc-shaped craft. So here you have Dr. Richard Mithe. No evidence of actually him ever existed, even if that's an actual picture of him. Can't find anything. And also Giuseppe Belluzzo, that comes up a bit later when we talk about the V7. So these 4 people. So on the right here, you have Rudolf Schriever. To the left, to the left, Rudolf Schriever. To the right, we have Dr. Richard Mithe. To the bottom left, Giuseppe Belluzzo. And this person here that actually I can't find a photo of is Otto Hubbermore. These are the guys that built Model 2 and 3. But depending on what books you see, books you read, you get different flying saucers. So Otto Hubbermore and Rudolf Schriever, bloody hell, I mixed my words up, both worked together to build their own flying saucer, and Giuseppe Belluzzo and Richard Mithe built their own flying saucer. And this was Giuseppe Belluzzo and Richard Mithe's one of the aircraft, which is again rotation going around to prepare the lift of the craft. Let's go forward again. This is Giuseppe Belluzzo's methods of propulsion, again, rotation and spin. I'm not going to go into this detail just yet. That requires a whole new episode. And you've got another one here, Mithe's flying disc, because there's a whole different concept. And let's move on again. Okay, so you have the Schriever flying saucer. This concept, no idea. And you got the Schriever and Hubbermore disc. So how many bloody discs did they create? You've got 10 different ones here, and this is an artist impression. It's not real, by the way. It's all AI. And here's another impression of the Richard Mithe and Otto Hubbermore projects. Again, so you have all these flying saucers. And again, okay, here's the Model 2, which is just like the first one, but advanced a bit more. I'm just going to skip ahead. Okay, this is the V7. This is the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapon, or the miracle weapon system. So all 4 scientists, all these gathered together to build a new propulsion system. And this was a flying discus. So you're scrapping the idea it was a flat disc. This was a whole new system of propulsion in itself. So let's zoom in a little bit. So in here, so we have 12, well, according to reports, 12 BMW O28 turbo engines. So instead of you're scrapping the fan, the bladed fan belt, and actually changing it to a jet engine, because this was developed by 44 and tested in 45, allegedly April 45, February or April. And in here is what created the propulsion lift. So instead of using, like I said, the spinning fan, which is basically, like I said, it's like a helicopter, you're actually scrapping it and using the BMW and Heineken jet engines to propel this craft. Now, there's no evidence whatsoever for these turbine-driven aircraft. Absolutely scrap none. I've done a deep dive into the books. I mean, books is only so far you can go, even with the internet as well. So I wonder if there's like a German researcher out there who can actually find some remnants of this, because let's go into, I think, some documents that alludes to turbine-driven aircraft and anti-gravity flying saucers as well. Again, here's another artist's impression of the V7 that was allegedly tested above the Baltic. It was tested in the 14th of February, 1945, so a few months before the World War II end. And it was tested, like I said, above the Baltic, which I'm going to show you a clip in a minute. And in here, it rose to a height of 78,000 feet, and it rose again to 80,000 feet. In fact, let's play some. We're going a deep dive today, guys. Blimey, I'm just going to shove it right in your face. So yeah, sit back and enjoy. So I might go off a little bit on a tangent on a few things, but it's going to be a very interesting episode. I'm going to really put things in a timeline for you guys. So let's start with that clip of the V7. Now, on this documentary, came out in 1994. I'll tell you what, I've got it here actually. Let's get rid of that and put my face on the screen. UFO Secrets of the Third Reich. If you think I've just got one copy, no, I actually got 3 copies of these. Okay. This is where the legends of the esoteric Haunebu anti-gravity flying saucers come from. And there's also another documentary which I'm going to show you in a minute. But let's go in and find out about what's this V7 stuff about. Right, Mule lovers, this is a documentary that I just showed you here from the videotape, UFO Secrets of the Third Reich. This came out in 1994, and it was co-produced by 2 Austrians, Norbert Jürgen Rathofer and Ralph Ettel. And I'm going to get to them in a minute because they're responsible for the esoteric side of the Nazi flying saucer program. But in this clip here, I'm going to show you just a brief background and flying saucers for the flying discs that the Rudolf Schriever, Otto Hubbard-Moore, Richard Methe, and Giuseppe Belluzzo, bit of a mouthful, started.
In July 1941, work began on this Schriever-Habermohl flying gyroscope, a jet-propelled vertical takeoff light aircraft. By the end of 1942, the first practical tests could begin. However, there were serious design faults in the first prototype. The same year, Dr. Richard...
Okay, so that's an alleged photograph of the V7 in flight.
Methe began work on a turbine-driven light aircraft, the RFC-7T. This was to be discus and not saucer-shaped. The Italian scientist Giuseppe Belluzzo soon joined this project, followed shortly afterwards by Schriever and Habermohl. They worked together to produce a functional, reliable light aircraft. And so, on the 17th of April 1945, Richard Methe was able to report to Adolf Hitler, "Today, under my direction, and in the presence of 3 Luftwaffe officers, the V7 was tested in the skies above the Baltic. The general characteristics and attainable performance of the aircraft were as follows. The V7 was a supersonic helicopter fitted with 12 BMW 028 turbo aggregate engines. During the first test flight, it reached an altitude of 78,000 feet, and on the second, rose to 80,000 feet.
Over the years, I've had the privilege of being a friend and colleague of...
Okie dokie. All right. Does he come across? Oh, no. Okay. Right. So there we have Bigfoot. No, I'm joking. Right. Okay. So that is just the Schriever and Habermohl. I think I've got another clip here somewhere. Should we bring up another clip? Right, let's do this.
In comparison to real technology, the Mita Beluzzo and Schreiber Habermold projects were really still quite conventional.
The hybrid use of this technology, some investigators believe, led to the development of the commonly recognized spacecraft known as the Beluzzo, Schreiber, the Methe systems. The first, the second, and the third prototypes of which we see here represent the most commonly seen and observed spacecraft worldwide since 1947. The documentation and personal experiences with many of the German fuel experts, however, suggest that as early as 1935, the Germans were aware that there was life and technology in the universe, and were at least indirectly aware of the possibilities of building their own saucer craft, which would make them basically the first to have opened the window to contact with other areas of higher evolutionary intelligence.
There you go, a bit of woo. Lovely. So there you go, guys. That is the Schreiber Habermold and Richard Mithé and Giuseppe Beluzzo programs. God, blimey. So that is the turbine-driven aircraft that was allegedly built from 1941 to 45. To back up some claims, let's bring some documents from after the war. This here is a declassified document from the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, from 1952. So at this time in the 1950s, there were these massive UFO reports in Texas and various parts of the US. I can't remember who was the president at the time. I think it was Truman. Might be wrong, or Eisenhower. And they wanted to find out what was going on about these flying saucers. And at this point, they started interviewing prisoners of wars and engineers. And what you would find, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to declassified documents, you get this. You'll blank out the names and stuff, so you won't actually find out who the person is, which I'm going to show you a document in a minute that might allude to some Foo Fighters. So, 1952 CIA document mentioned German flying saucers and Canadian Avrocast saucer. So this is interesting. This is a turbine-driven aircraft. And in this document, it's stating that German flying saucer, but the Soviets have German flying saucer experts and plans. This is 13th of May, 1953. And in this document here, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. It's a bit hard to read. Oh, no, what am I doing? Let's go back. Sorry, guys. There we go. Zoom in here. So in here is an account from someone called George Klein. Zoom in a little bit more there. So George Klein, if I... on top of my head, he was actually some information here in regards of him. Yeah, German engineer stated recently through many people believe that flying saucers to be a post-war development. They were actually a planning stage for German aircraft factories as early as 1941. So again, he's mentioned about German flying saucers, but the turbine-driven aircraft. Klein said that he was an engineer at the Ministry of Speer. Obviously that was in the University of Prague, I believe, might be wrong. And from 1942, he was the Ministry of Armaments and Ammunitions for the Third Reich. In Prague, yep, I was right, in 14th of February 1945, the first experimental flight of a flying saucer. Now, the first flight of an experimental flying saucer might be talking about the V7, because if we go to the other pages, he mentions Let's have a little look here. During an experiment, Klein reported the flying saucer reached an altitude of 12,400 meters within 3 minutes and a speed of 2,200 kilometers per hour. I mean, feel free to read this if you want to, but he mentions in this document, because I'm going to go into this a bit more detail when I talk about the turbine-driven aircraft. Like everything, I'm going to break the whole thing down. I'm just going to allude to a bit of things in this episode. But he mentions Shriver and Hobbermore. Might be in there. Oh, here we are. Yeah. So, according to reports, nothing to know whereabouts of Hobbermore since his disappearance from Prague. Shriver died recently in Berman. And Methay escaped in the Messerschmitt 163 into the US. Okay, so here we've got a mention of the Shriver and Hobbermore projects. Okay, but there's no mention of Giuseppe Belluzzo, the Italian scientist. Remember, because he just said he designed the propulsion system, but he didn't build the flying saucer at all. Okay, that's my own opinion. So here we have a document from the CIA itself in regards of turbine-driven aircraft. This is a newspaper from George. George Klein was in this newspaper. Can't remember what it was called, and this was the first flying saucer flown in Prague in 1945, which is not true because the first test flight was in 1942, according to whatever book you read. Really, it's all speculation, guys. There's no evidence for this. Like, there's no evidence for the Haunebu and anti-gravity flying saucers, which I'm going to be talking about in a bit in detail. So again, this is from 1954-5. George Klein came out with this newspaper report, and here we have a design of the flying disc itself, which kind of looks like the Rudolf Schriever and Otto Hobbermore flying discs. Okay, let's move on. Let's move away from the anti-gravity, the turbine-driven aircraft, and let's move on to the ooky spooky, the esoteric side of the Nazi flying saucers. So this, again, see, they blanked out who the person is. This is obviously an engineer, okay? This is from the FBI reports. Now, this is from a book called... No, that is not the name of it. Let's bring this up here. Hitler's Flying Saucers, pretty good book. There we go. I've got Schriever and Hobbermore disc in there, but it alludes to Haunebu flying saucers as well. Which again, I'm not ruling that out because the Germans had the quite possibility of building such craft. Let's go and have a look at this. So this is from the FBI in a report of German field propulsion flying saucers, November the 7th, 1957. And in here, the name's blanked out. And is in regards of Warsaw, Poland. So this person was in Warsaw, Poland in 1942 until the summer of 1955. So near the end of the war. 45. Sorry, my apologies. Let's do a look into this. Upon interview, he advised that the German prowl during the 1945 observed a vehicle described as circular in shape, 75 to 100 yards in diameter, approximately 14 foot high, and the vehicle was observed to slowly rise vertically to the height significant to clear 50-foot wall and to move slowly horizontally for a short distance out of view, obstructed by the trees. Now, remember flying saucers, you know, they've got they tend to like shut off car engines and stuff like that in some reports. Listen to this. The engine of the tractor failed to operate during this period and other occasions when high-pitched whining noise heard in the area. No indication of mental sustainability during the interview. So there we go, guys. There's looks like some sort of prisoner of war observed this flying saucer, which seems to be like making a high whining pitch noise. We should describe the saucer in a bit more detail. Let's just have a little look in here. What's this one here? So this is to do with field propulsion flying saucers. Sometime 1943, social member of the Luftwaffe, Russian front. Near the end of 1944, he was released from his duties as assigned to test pilot a top secret project in the Black Forest of Austria. During this period, he observed an aircraft described above. It was a saucer-shaped, about 21 foot in diameter, radio controlled. It was and mounted several jet engines around the exterior portion of the craft. Right. Okay. So this sounds like the Rudolf Schriever craft. Further description: exterior portion as revolving around the dome and the center, which remains stationary. So yeah, this is the Rudolf Schriever craft. Oh, it actually tells you about the flight in there. I think I've missed this document. Oh, it says here that he's actually taken a photograph of the craft in flight. He asserted he was able to retain the negative of the photograph he made at 7,000 meters. That's 20,000 feet. The copy of the negative. Sorry, I'm just rambling to myself here. So in this report, the person's name she's blanked out mentioned they had actually taken a photograph of this craft. Now, this is the turbine-driven aircraft that which I wanted to move away from. So, but anyway, let's move away from it. And here's some fuel mixture that was used for the craft itself. And again, some more field propulsion flying saucers. And we have obviously the scientist. Right, Joseph Andrews Ab, I'm going to get to in a bit. So let's talk about the Haunebu. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent here, just finding out what information I've got on these pictures. Right. We're back. This documentary here that came out in 1990. So this is a late 80s, early 90s production. And there were two authors that I need to talk about in a minute because they play a massive part into the esoteric side of the Nazi flying saucer program. Okay. So I'm just going to hit play on this documentary because you're going to find the Haunebu flying saucers and the Maria Orsic and the Vril Society. And this is a story where it came from. It started in 1990. So I'm just going to let this play and I'll stop and pause and yeah, go from there. And also, I must mention, you are going to hear the worst music for a documentary. I'm a musician myself. I can't stand this. Terrible.
Victor Schauberger's experimental vehicles were based on esoteric principles and focused his research on electrogravitation. In other words, regarding gravity as an electrical force which can be utilized for propulsion.
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, Victor Schauberger dealt with vortex torsion physics. Let's bring up something. Victor Schauberger. So this was Victor Schauberger, and he was an inventor, a naturalist, and a forest worker. His main role was building a repulsion device for the Third Reich in the 30s. And here is his... Dave, you can see that? Yeah, you can see that. That's fine. Yeah, that's his homemade generator. Now, Victor Schauberger dealt with water. Now, I'll just put me a bit bigger. I'm just going to show you what I mean by this. So if you can imagine water going down a river, imagine my fist as a rock and the water hits over and swoops down. It doesn't actually go down and go smooth. What happens? It comes over the rock. So imagine it goes over the rock and it turns and it does a little spiral effect. And this is what the propulsion is used for trout to go up streams. You ever seen trout when they go upstream? It seems to go like really, really high, like they're sort of jumping up. And sometimes they don't really wiggle their tail. They're actually using the propulsion as the water's coming down, is coming back up, and that's what's pushing the fish, the trout, up into the higher stream. And Victor Schauberger took that method of the spinning effect and put it into an actual device. Let's bring up the repulsion. Oh, there it is. Because I want to show you the physics of it. So this is the actual device itself. It is in the museum, but there's the top missing from it. The top is missing from it. Let's have a little look. Here it is in the museum. I believe it is in Austria. There's a whole museum dedicated to Victor Schauberger, which I believe is run by his grandson at this point. And inside here, again, if you have a look where the cursor is, you will see you've got the anti-gravity bloody vril flying saucer, which had nothing to do with this. It's just been mixed up with Victor Schauberger and Nazi flying saucers. But this is the idea of torsion physics. It's almost like a tornado effect. And this is what he used for this device. And it was to do with air and water, if I'm right. But what's that got to do with bloody Nazi flying saucers? To me, that just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But let's continue going down the avenue of this documentary, because this is the start of the Nazi flying saucer program, the anti-gravity esoteric side.
The U-13 Department of the SS concentrated their efforts on this technique. This was the means by which the Haunebu flying saucer was powered.
The Haunebu flying saucer is what John Warner's father is talking about, the big flying disc, the photographs that I showed you earlier.
Here you can see the construction plans of the Haunebu 2.
Right, sorry for stop and starting, but these are really, really good points. Okay, these documents came out according to Norbert Jürgen Rathofer and Ralph Ettel. This came out in 1990 due to the unification of Germany at that time. And all these World War II documents came out. And what you have is this. And in here, it does say SSE4, and the date is 1943. And they built the first one in 1942. It's a bit difficult to see there. But the first Haunebu 1 was built in 1939. And I'm thinking, well, if they managed to perfect these anti-gravity flying saucers, how come they didn't use it during the war when they had it at the beginning of the war? So this is Haunebu flying saucer 2. And again, look at it. It looks just like the George Adamski flying saucer. He's got the 3 blobs underneath. And you think George Adamski's flying saucer came out in 1952. And the Haunebu flying saucers came out 45 years after the Second World War. Like 40 years after George Adamski's UFO. I know that sort of brim of the hat. It looks exactly the same. So let's continue. Oh, the music. Oh, kill me.
The computer graphic enhancement shows something of the look of these Haunebu flying saucers.
Great.
The engine is very likely to have been designed by Captain Hans Kohler and built by the German AEG company in 1944.
Talking about Captain Hans Kohler's tachometer.
The engine being called the Kohler converter. This engine was designed so that it needed a relatively small amount of energy to activate it. This energy coming from an accumulator or battery. After a short time, the Kohler converter built up sufficient energy transformed from the gravitational field of the Earth.
Oh, no,
This is a diagram of the Kohler converter. And this is a photograph of the actual converter.
Alleged photograph.
Operating on a principle of genius simplicity.
Yes.
This is a preliminary sketch of the Hanibu 2. The cockpit here is outlined in red. With a circular driving unit beneath, outlined in purple.
Okay, I gotta stop because this music is driving me absolutely bloody insane. So in here we've got the Shriver and Hubbarmore projects. Oh, here's Hitler standing next to a prototype. Let's have a little look.
On the 7th of April 1944, Meaty showed construction plans to Hitler and demonstrated the vehicle in flight.
By the way, guys, if you want to see these documentaries, they're on my YouTube channel, The Cosmic Twilight. They're all on there for you to all enjoy.
In this photograph, Hitler is standing next to a model of the new prototype.
Like that.
This V7 saucer was built with 12 BMW engines of the type 028. The V7 rose to 20,000 meters on the first test and 24,000 meters on the second test. Helium was the fuel used in this machine.
Okay, right, I can't stand anymore. Just have a little scoop around, have a look. We've got some Foo Fighters. I want to find the Maria Orsic. Where's Maria Orsic? Here we go, Haunabu flying saucers. Have a look at these.
The gun is clearly visible under this craft. These photographs show the Hanibu 2 experimental craft fitted underneath with tank guns developed for the Sherman Panzer or Panther tanks.
No, it's a laser beam.
Although originally these craft were designed to carry electronic guns, they were later fitted with 7.5 centimeter tank cannons.
It's a bit thin for a cannon, right?
The weight of the cannon would not have been a problem on the Hanibu craft, which weighed almost 100 tons anyway, because the tachyon and electrogravitation engine generated its own gravitational field.
Enjoying the music? I'm certainly not. Have a look here.
They were 109 meters long, powered by 4 Tula engines.
Right, there's the engines, okay.
They were designed to carry 1 Hanibu and a few Vril.
Yeah. What we have here is the Andromeda machine. I cannot take this documentary seriously. So this is the cigar-shaped aircraft that I do believe John Warner talks about, almost like being like a submarine type sort of craft itself. And it's a tricky one, man. You know, this is a bloody big craft. You know, this is a gigantic, this is the Haunabu. And these are the real flying saucers, which I think I showed you a photograph of it on top of a tripod. So again, this is just adding mythos. Okay, so this documentary, I should have specified first, this is the beginning of the esoteric side of the Nazi flying saucers, the Haunabu, the Vril, the Maria Orsic, the Vril Society. It's all going to get jumbled up now. And so I'm going to break this down. So remember, this is just the beginning. This documentary, 1990 or 1991, this came out.
This is an example of a construction plan, very rarely seen.
Oh my God, the music. You just start dancing. That's it, no more. That's it. So this documentary came out in 1991, and George Adamski. Oh, hang on, let's have a look.
This photograph of the mothership with UFOs emerging is from George Adamski.
That's right.
George Adamski also saw a Haunebu-type spacecraft. He claimed that...
There we go. Perfect. See what I mean? The Haunebu almost looks exactly the same as the George Adamski. Remember, there is no mention of Haunebu flying saucers between 1945 and 1990. That's 45 years. There's no mention. I can't find any record. And this is going back to what John Warner is saying. He is saying that he's not too sure if there's any record of these flying saucers between that sort of time period. And I'm telling you now, there's nothing. Only turbine-driven aircraft. But the Haunebu flying saucers, that came out definitely, from my research, 1990 in this documentary here. Also, the Norbert Jorgen Rathofer and Ralph Ettel, I need to allude to them in just a sec. So let's just try and finish off with this documentary first, because the music's awful.
They came from Venus.
Oh God, did it?
For comparison, here is a computer-generated replica of the Haunebu 2.
Okay, all right, I've read enough. Right, so that is it. That is the first mention of Haunebu and not Thrill yet. Let me just try and find 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to find Maria Orsic, because that gets complicated as well. What I'm going to show you is the first ever mention of Maria Orsic and the Thrill Society. Now, the Thrill Society you can trace back through the early 70s. I've got a book here talking about the Thrill Society. Now, it doesn't mention Maria Orsic or anything like that. And this is called Morning of the Magicians from 1970. From 1972. So this is how far back it goes, which alludes to a society called the Thrill Society. Now, the Thrill, I've got to save that for another time because it needs a whole new topic in its own. Was a very interesting concept back in the late 18th century with Madame Blavatsky. But the first mention of Thrill, from what I've done from my research, is from a book called The Coming of the New Race by Edward D. Leighton. And this is from 1871, I believe. Here we have the Coming Race by Edward Buell Leighton from 1871. And in this book, it describes an underground civilization, an advanced underground civilization that used the power of Vril. Now, Vril, back then in the 18th century, was known as the life force, a bit like Chi and Piranha, and some other like life healing sort of frequencies. It's like the life force. There's many different meanings, depends on what culture you look into. But that's what I meant back then. Okay, the life force, like the power force. Helena Blavatsky, she popularized Vril as well with being a life force. So it was a very interesting concept back in the late 18th century into early 19th century. And bear in mind that Nazi philosophy did take a lot of their ideas from Helena Blavatsky. They did. And the concept of Vril was what they used. And unfortunately, the Thrill Society, there's absolutely no records of it from my research. I might be wrong, but Peter Lavender, a great World War II researcher, there's a YouTube channel called Tino Struckman Battlefields, and he's a German researcher who looked into the history of World War II, especially the German side, and he even says he cannot find any information on the Vril Society. There might have been one, but there's no records of it. There should have been some sort of record, like the Tula Gesellschaft. There's records of it. We know that. But the Thrill Society was alluded to, like I said, in this book, Coming of the New Race, that came out in 1971. And unfortunately, for being an author, you need to hype up your book. So you need to add new things on. And unfortunately, when it comes to Nancy Flying Saucers, this is exactly what's happened. You've got story after story. It says, oh, I'll just add Victor Schauber into this. And, oh, we'll add some Hannibal Flying Saucers into that anti-gravity stuff. And it just gets complicated. And the thrill is what's been added into this. And unfortunately, for my research, there's no such thing as the Thrill Society. But we'll just go and say, okay, yes, there was, just for the sake of this video. Let's continue on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first mention of Maria Orsic and the Thrill Society and the long blonde-haired women. This is the blueprint of what I'm about to show you now. I do have a very lengthy copy. Let's bring it up a bit bigger. Of this book. Okay. It's called The Vril Project. I remember those two Austrians I talked about earlier, Norbert Jürgen Rathofer and Ralph Ettel. These two people co-wrote the documentary I just showed you, and they documented. They co-wrote a documentary. On another UFO Nancy Flying Saucer documentary that I'm about to show you in a minute. So they co-wrote this book together called The Vril Project, and this is the first ever mention of Maria Orsic and the Vril Society and the Haunebu Flying Saucers and the Vril Flying Saucers. This book came out 45 years after World War II. There's no concept of Maria Orsic or the Haunebu Flying Saucers between that time period. There is none. I might be wrong. From my research, I can't find anything. There is nothing to actually go on. So this book here, we're going to go through, which is the blueprint. So anyone who thinks they're the reincarnation of Maria Orsic and everything, this is where it's going to get all... Oh, shall I censor that bit out? Okay, this is where it all starts, guys. Remember what I was saying as being an author. You wanna spice it up a bit. So what you got to do, put up bloody long, thin, blonde-haired woman, bit of nipples, tits and ass. There you go. This is, and again, Vril, okay? This symbol here, I cannot find it anywhere else in that 45-year time period from 1945 to 1990 when this book came out. I can't find any of this. This is just a new concept to spice it up, to sell books to bloody nerds, no offense. But again, this is where you get the long blonde hair, blue-eyed, psychic mediums. This is the Maria Orsic story, which plays a massive part into the Nancy Flying Saucer program. I might be wrong, but I'm going to say this straight off the bat. She don't exist. And I'm going to show you why she don't exist, because all the bloody, there's no scrap of evidence. And don't give me that BS of, oh, no, the thing is, she was too important. They've got to keep her in secret because she had sort of communicated telepathic communications to a planet 65 million light years away, to the planet of Aldebaran, which, by the way, sounds like flipping Alderaan from Star Wars. Alderaan sounds the bloody same thing. So there's all this, it's just made up stuff, but let's continue. I'm going to try and hold back because this is what infuriates me, guys, with the Nancy Flying Saucers. I really try and take it seriously, but you've got this woohoo claptrap, which technically what it is. I might be wrong, but this is time machines and communicating with distant planets. This is stories made up 45 years after the war. And if you want to read it, go ahead. This is the PDF file on archive.com. Excuse me. Yeah, if you type into the Vril Project PDF, this will come up and you can have a little read of it. It's all in German, but this is where you're going to get all the symbolisms for the Vril Society. It goes full woohoo, guys. And according to this story here, which I have read, sounds like a bloody comic book. Maria Orsic. Let's bring up a picture of Maria Orsic. Say, sod that. I've got loads of pictures of Maria Orsic because I'm sad that way. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, what's this? Boof. Ain't she pretty, guys? Ain't she pretty? Could you just imagine her naked? Yeah, of course you did. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present you to Maria Orsic. She is the psychic medium who the Nazis employed. This is a true story. Well, what I'm about to say is 100% true. Look at me. Right, first of all, look at me. This is 100% true. If you don't believe this, then there's something wrong with you, all right? Joking. So Maria Orsic here was part of the Thrill Society in 1925. Remember that date, 1925 or 23, whatever. And what she was a part of was Karl Holzhofer, Dietrich Eckart, Rudolf von Bottendorf all got together to talk about the Spear of Destiny. And, I'm not going to blabber on. Let's grab a documentary because I can talk about this stuff. And I think this will line this up perfectly.
By the same token, this period would also see the development of positive knowledge, which would lead to the creation of a comprehensive technology.
Really?
And once again, our search for clues in our quest for the alternative technology, supposedly responsible for the German UFOs, which would appear later, led us back to Vienna, to the year 1917. 4 men and a woman met here in the Viennese cafe Schopenhauer. The young Maria Ortisch.
Right. Bang. Thank you. That is what I was trying to find. Okay. Right. Let's sum up Maria Orsic. First things first. That is the first sketch of Maria Orsic. Okay. What you're seeing there, she looks like a quail. Don't get me wrong. So she hasn't got the beauty and the class of what the photograph I just showed you. I should have mentioned this documentary, UFO Secrets of the Third Reich, which is just that there. Okay, see that there. This came out in 1994. So this was 4 years after the first documentary I just showed you, which talks about Haunebu flying saucers. I remember Norbert Jorgen Rathofer and Ralph Ettel, those two Austrians, co-wrote the Thrill Project book, co-wrote this documentary and the previous documentary. So they are the components of the esoteric story side. So remember this. This is the first ever sketch, or photograph sketch of Maria Orsic in 1919 or whatever they said.
Spiritualistic medium from Zagreb.
And she was a spiritual medium from Zagreb, what you just said.
And fighter pilot Lothar Weitz, the occultist, orientalist, and officer Karl Haushofer, Rudolf von Bottendorf, an occultist who had recently returned from the Orient, as well as Prelate Gernot from the Order of Knights Templar. Their subject was the coming of the New Age. They spoke of secret revelations, the Spear of Destiny, the magical violet black stone. They discussed the possibility of making transmedial contact with the ancient Germanic and Babylonian deities, Ishtar, Ostara, and Isais, and of communicating with distant worlds, not only on this side, but also on the other.
Almost has like Raiders of the Lost Ark sort of vibes, like Indiana Jones. As you go to think about it, I watched it the other day. It kind of alludes to this, you know, the Himmler. Oh, what's it called? The Anuneb, the hunt for artifacts before the war, which they said Hitler was involved with. It wasn't. It was actually Himmler, the mad occultist. But anyway, let's continue.
It is quite likely that this coffee house meeting witnessed the birth of the secret Thule Society, which in turn later spawned the German National Socialist Party, the SS, Black Sun, and the Friel Society, which in its turn gave a foundation to the...
Again, the word Vril Society, which was this group house thing here. Remember, that came back, that first analogy came from the 1971 book, Morning of the Magicians. Okay, and they have there's no mention of Maria Orsic. No mention of Maria Orsic, guys. And it just alludes to an organization, a society, Gesellschaft, put it that way. It's got the word shaft in it.
the occult activities of the Third Reich and the new comprehensive technology. And the beginning of German UFOs.
Boom.
What was the
There you go.
secret behind it all? The invincible source of power for them was the black sun.
Okay, I got to stop because I'm going to get a copyright strike. Yeah, so remember, guys, this is the birth of the esoteric side of the Nazi flying saucer program. It happened 45 years after the war. Keep on stressing that. I know this documentary on the back of my hand, and I know all the music is Maria Orsic. So let's just going into Maria Orsic and the Vril Society. Let's just say Maria Orsic and Vril Society exist, part of this conspiracy. Just for the sake of it, let's have a little look.
The Reich was born. The increasing political ambitions of the Thule Society resulted in a number of smaller groups going their own way. One of these groups was the Vril Society.
Again, that symbol, okay, came out in that time period in 1990 in the Vril Project. Okay, I can't find any record of the symbol anywhere, guys. Can't find it.
Towards the end of 1919, a select group of people, members of both the Thule and Vril societies, met in an old hunting lodge near Berchtesgaden. Taking a prominent part in the proceedings for the first time was Dr. H.O. Schumann, a man whose area of expertise would today be called alternative energy. Nevertheless, the leading figure was the medium Maria Ortisch. A second medium was also present on this occasion, the 18-year-old Sigrun. Maria Ortisch presented texts she had received from her spirit medium, one in the Sumerian alphabet and the other in the secret code of the Knights Templar.
Always going
Both
woo-hoo.
texts had already been translated. Were they messages from the gods or tidings from some alien civilization? Construction plans for the development of some new advanced technology which would enable mankind to reach for the stars? From now on, the members of the Vril Society devoted themselves wholeheartedly to the realization of what must be one of the most bizarre ideas that ever occurred to the mind of man.
Right, can you guess? Can you just have a... Excuse me, this is where it gets all woohoo, guys. Which you look into it, you go, hold on a minute, wait a minute. Have a little guess what this device is. This is so after the Thule Gesellschaft, which was in 1925, that disbanded. So yeah, from 1925, would you like to know what they actually built? Maria Orsic had the telepathic communications from planet 68 million light years away, from Alderaan, or Aldebaran, whatever you want to call it, from Star Wars. It's a time machine.
The construction of a time machine that would transport them to the realms of the beyond and bring them face to face with the gods themselves.
You see? Proper woohoo, isn't it? I quite like it. I'm a woohoo myself. I'm a conspiracy theorist, and there's a part of me that goes, it's just fun. It's fun. I need to stop taking it too seriously. I need to stop taking this stuff too seriously. Just enjoy what it is worth. It's ufology. It's a bloody joke. It's too political. It's gone. Yeah. That's another topic for another time.
We don't know just exactly how far they got with their machine. The experiments carried out lasted almost 2 years. What we can say for certain is that the machine was the inspiration behind the Vril levitation power unit.
Okay, so there. Excuse me. This is where the Vril, here it is, the Vril craft come from. It came from Maria Orsic. It wasn't German engineers or scientists. No, it came from Maria Orsic, guys. Okay, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, gorgeous woman who doesn't exist. No, but she built these flying saucers, all right, and time machine.
At the beginning of 1924, the machine was dismantled and taken to Augsburg in southern Germany for storage, perhaps to the Messerschmitt aircraft factory.
Why would they put a bloody time machine device in the Messerschmitt fucking air factory? What the bloody hell is that?
As a member of the Thule Society, Rudolf Hess gave a number of lectures and was, among others, one of the people responsible for the early encouragement this new technology was accorded. In all things, we are able to recognize two principles which decide upon matter and events: light and darkness, good and evil, creation and destruction. These two principles, the creative and the destructive, determine our technical means.
Okay. Oh, Victor Schauberger. Okay. Let's move forward. Remember the sketch I showed you in that documentary? Well, that was the first ever sketch of Maria Orsic. Suddenly, you had this pop up of Maria Orsic. If you put Maria, let's just go on the internet now. And let's put in Maria Orsic. Yeah, Orsic. Because I'm going to show you how out of hand it's got. Where people just run with any information without any fact checking anything. They just run along with it. And they don't do enough research into it to say, hold on a minute, this doesn't really make any lick of sense. Let's bring it up. Maria Orsic. Here it is in Microsoft Bing. So here we have so many artist impressions of Maria Orsic. Here's one. That's the one I showed you there. There's one which has got curly hair here. Again, let's just go back because there's about, again, remember that I just showed you the real thing that came from that book from 1990. It's where it all comes from, guys. It's the blueprint for all the esoteric stuff that came to the Nazi Party. So here we have many artists' impression of Maria Orsic. Again, we have this one here. She's got long, strangly hair. So what they've done, they've actually taken this photograph here of her face, and they've cropped it with just extra hair to look like that. And I mean, come on, who believes that that's bloody real? Let's just go back. Because there's like 5 different photographs of Maria Orsic. So remember, this was taken after that sketch in that documentary. And the Vril Society, and here's another sketch of Maria Orsic. And here we have 4 different photographs. Not photographs, drawings, I should say. Now, some people say that's AI. I'm not too sure because that's been out of quite a number of years. But here we have different artist impressions of Maria Orsic. And you tell me this, ladies and gentlemen, is this was this taken in 1925? Does any of these photographs look like it's taken in 1985? No, it's not. Okay, it's not. And again, so yeah, this is what I've got to sort of go through and really analyze what's going on. And again, you get all these memes pop up. The Thrill Society was a secret society made up of 4 women. They claim to have their long hairs in order to act. I'm not going to read this crap because it's just nonsense. It's nonsense. Break it down, guys. This is what my aim is today. And again, another Photoshop. And people buy into this stuff. People actually buy into this stuff. Oh, there's a sketch. Like that's the first sketch. Does that look like that? I'm sorry. And again, oh, this is a brilliant one. Oh my god, this was on a website. I don't know what it was. It was like bloody Techopallades or something like that. Something ridiculous. And someone was saying that, oh, this is an actual real photograph on Maria Orsic. And I'm going, hold on a bloody minute. If you're in Britain, you know who this woman is. Would you like to know who this woman is? Right, before I show you who this woman is, just take a very good look at this clearly photoshopped image that people actually think it's real. Would you like to know who this woman is? She's a British model called Kate Moss, well known for taking cocaine. Not my type of girl, but this is her. So what has someone has actually done? Let's just take a decent photo. I cannot find the original photo, but that is 110% Kate Moss. Let's just bring the Maria Orsic photograph back. And again, so what someone has done is they've taken a photo of Hitler. they've cropped the face out and they put Kate Moss's face in there and putting it out, thinking that is people think this is real. I mean, you cannot make it up. It just makes me laugh. This is why I just don't take Nancy Flying Saucer seriously. The Vril Society, Maria Orsic, it's just funny. People are so gullible and buy into it. I'm sorry if I sound stubborn, but my God, I've spent so many years researching into this, buying countless books, and it's just overwhelmingly nonsense. And again, another artist impression, and again, oh, I mean, I'm all in favor for long blonde-haired women, ruling the world, especially if they're gorgeous, flipping hell. But I get this, just attention to sell books. It's just there to sell boners. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. Oh, I'm just going to leave that there for the moment. Oh, it's raining outside. Now, before I do a conclusion of everything I've talked about today, now this is just a very brief background. I'm not going to go in depth detail into the Vril Society, even though I said it's nonsense. There's my conspiracy brain still goes, I look into it. The esoteric side goes quite deep. And when it comes to the telepathic psychic realm of Nazi esotericness, when it comes to Nazi flying saucers, I'm just a bit skeptical. Look, I've seen psychics in the past, psychics that are clearly faked. They just want money to prey off the people that are vulnerable because someone in their life has died, because they want to communicate with their spirits. And the amount of fakes I've seen because they've watched Most Haunted and consider themselves an expert because they've got a fucking EVP meter and a bloody camera, So I've been duped in the past when it comes to psychics. My personal opinion, I haven't really done much research into psychics. So maybe that's the realm I should really look into. So that esoteric side, we're going to go into a lot more deeper into the Haunabu flying saucers and the Vril flying saucers. In fact, let's get a few photographs of the Vril and the Haunabu, and then I'm going to move on to Joseph Andres Epp, because he has taken a photograph that I truly think is an actual real Nazi flying saucer, and this is a true photograph. Okay, no BS. And no one in the community talks about this. So let's just bring up some Haunabu and some Vrils and just have a little look. Okie dokie. Here is a typical example of what I would describe is a Billy Meyer style photograph. For those who know Billy Meyer, he's a very well-known fake person in Sweden. I think it was Sweden or Finland, or one or the other. And he would film these flying saucers that are clearly on string. These are fake models he would use. And yes, he had one arm, I know that. But he would use models and infuse it in actual real landscapes. I mean, he's got flipping flying saucers in trees. I mean, have a look at Billy Meyer photographs and videos. They're clearly fake, especially in 2023 standards. But this is a very typical example, guys, of what a model could be. It looks very convincing, but who knows where this photograph come from? And this is the other thing. These photographs, it's hard to track down. Remember I was talking about Rudolf, what are they called? So many bloody German Austrian names. Norbert Jorgen Rasshofer and Ralph Ettel, the two chaps that co-wrote the two documentaries and the Vril project. I can't track down any of their contact information. I know Ralph Ettel, he put out a book that was nothing UFO related. I think it was more or less like a science fiction book. But I'm trying to track down where these photographs come from, where did the blueprints come from, because there's not a lot of information that comes with it. Obviously, I mentioned about the unification of Germany in 1990, where all these World War II documents started to come out. But again, I want to see the original photographs. I want to see the original blueprints, which I'm going to bring up in a bit. This is hand caller's tachymeter. That was part of the anti-gravity drive. Oh, this is quite interesting. Remember I was talking about the brim of the hat with the Hauenboo's flying saucer with a gun turret underneath it? Now, if you look underneath this was a photograph taken. I've got the description down there. Let's have a little look. Okay, this was a photograph taken by Barber in November the 13th, 1966. And this is in Ohio. I believe, is that Zanesville, Ohio? HO? I think that's right. And he noticed this flying saucer about to fly over his house. Almost looked like a brim of a hat. That was the first one. But here's the second one. Now, let's go back to the Hauenboo flying saucers with a gun turret underneath it. If I zoom in, this looks like, as far as I can go, that looks like it's got a gun turret underneath it to a certain degree. There is a much more clearer shot I've got somewhere in my archive, but you can clearly see there's like something mounted underneath it. And I go, oh, hold on a minute. This looks quite genuine. But again, 1960s is a bit 1950s, 60s photographs. They very well known for faking stuff. Let's move on. That was the Andromeda machine. There's more declassified documents. Here we have the Vril flying saucer. This will be on the internet quite a bit in regards to the subject. Again, very good. You could have a model car at the back. Also, you've got the tripod, which, again, take with a very pinch of salt. I believe the Vril and Hauenboo flying saucers, and I was going around telling people about it. And no wonder why I know people didn't want to talk to me, because I keep mentioning stuff like this. So take this with a pinch of salt, guys. With any conspiracy theories, you have to go both ways. You have to be 50-50. You can't just stick down one echo chamber. You have to look at both sides of the story and say, okay, weigh up your odds. What is the, for instance, the scientific side is saying and what the conspiracy side is saying? I normally, 9 times out of 10, the conspiracy side normally sounds more accurate. Let's move on. Again, is another Vril flying saucer taken off. You got the sort of landscape in the background there as well. So this is just a typical example. Let's just bring up more photographs. This alleged blueprint came out in the Vril project, which is this book here. So like I said, if you want to see the book, guys, if you type in the Vril project PDF, and the website is the archive. In fact, I'll put a link in the description so you can all check it out. But all these blueprints came from this book. Okay, this is the Hauenboo one, and there are some very discrepancies with the drawings on here. There was the 2 and there's number 3, and the idea these Hauenboos were a carrier craft, but obviously there were guns mounted underneath it. Again, looks very much like the George Sampson photograph. And here again is the Andromeda machine. Okay, in here mentions the Hauenboo 1, 2, 3 and the Vril. I'm not too sure if that I'm not too sure, but is that how many craft they built? I don't know. It seems very unlikely, because if they would have built, 52 Hauenboo 1s and 106 Hauenboo 2 and 119 Hauenboo 3 and the Vril 84, I think we would have seen them a lot during Germany at that time. Let's skip forward. Let's have a little look what we got here. Here's another drawing of the Vril 9. This description is in Igor Bukowski's book, The Truth of the Wunderwaffe. And it shows some sort of a drive mechanism for these flying saucers. At the top here, you can see the person in the cockpit. But again, is where these drawings come from. I want to see the original drawings. And again, so you will find these sketches of all different types of flying saucers regarding to the Vril and the Haunaboo. There's a Hans Corliss tachymeter, probably nothing special there. And again, this is the Haunaboo 5. So God, they got bloody 5 models now. Oh no, that's the third one. Again, but these would have been gigantic crafts, which I wouldn't be surprised if the Germans did build like a prototype that looked like this, like a brim of a hat. I mean, we're going back to John Warner's father and what John Warner's, the 4th son, claims, what his father said, that this flying saucer he witnessed, which was underground, okay, but they did have massive warehouses to hide these things. I mean, if you look at the Hindenburg craft, that bloody thing was massive, so they could easily fit like a Haunaboo in there. He said it was the size of a football field. I mean that craft is the size of a football field, if I remember rightly. Yeah, the thing was massive. So yeah, I'm surprised if a Haunaboo can fit in there, no problem. But again, it's just there's no evidence to back anything up, you know. So this was just a few blueprints for you guys just to look into. Like I said, I'm going to do a more deep dive into this on another episode. So let's move on. I tell you what, let's move on as a final cap on this episode. So I promised you a flying disc, a German flying disc. I'm going to prove that to you now, but I'm going to talk about someone who took the photograph, and his name is Joseph Andreas Epp. This guy here, Joseph Andreas Epp. He was a German engineer, a Luftwaffe pilot, and an inventor. He was fascinated with aircraft back when he was a kid, and he ended up building these model airplanes. And he grew a fascination throughout his teen years. And eventually, he worked on a shipyard for a bit and found out he didn't really enjoy that work, but he wanted to deal more with aircraft. And at the time, in the early 30s, this has been 1920s at the time, he ended up working for the Air Force to learn about the aircraft, the mechanics behind it, the engineering side. He ended up getting a degree in the University of Radstock. Is it Roadstock, I think? I've got my notes here. And eventually, he ended up being a teacher and a professor for mechanic engineering in the University of Rostock. Yeah, I think it's Rostock. And eventually, he ended up designing circular disc-shaped craft. Now, it's just another photograph of Epp from 1934 as a young man. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And I wonder if, okay, so he became fascinated with an aircraft. It was a helicopter. And the same principle was for what Rudolf Schriever was. I'm going to grab so it's the same sort of design as Rudolf Schriever. This is the turbine-driven aircraft, but I'm going to get to the anti-gravity thing in a minute because the correlation is quite interesting. So let's bring up this photograph. This was Joseph Andreas Epp inspiration. We've got the 2 rotated propellers, and this would provide the lift. So it's a helicopter, really. But he became fascinated whether or not to take that concept and put it into an actual circular disc shape. So the whole cockpit itself, the whole craft, would be a propeller. And he came up with that concept, and I've got the original drawing here in his book, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Let's just grab this up. That one there. So he came up with this concept in it says there, 1934. And again, if we go back to the Rudolf Schriever flying disc with a propeller fan going around, this is the same sort of thing. You've got the jet engines, You've got your propeller at the top, and also got the wheels and the jets propelling it forward. So this is 1934. I'm going to show you his book here. That's it here. So this is the story and a biography of Joseph Andres Epp. He died in 1997, but this book came out in 2002. So whoever wrote this book might have been making some stuff up, and I think there is some fabrication into this, because there's some weird stories of Joseph Andres Epp as a kid breaking into an Air Force and meeting the famous pilot Udust, I believe. I'm going to go into a bit more detail into another episode on Joseph Andres Epp story, but this is called Die Realität der Flugscheiben, which means the reality of flying discs. And I'm going off Joseph Andres Epp story according to this book. Yeah. So that concept he brought into the university, not university. It was the Joseph brought his plans to the Ministry of Aviation in Berlin in 1939. And at this point, Rudolf Schriever was appointed as the vertical takeoff landing program. Obviously, there's this flying disc that he was creating in the early 40s. And what Joseph is saying later on in his life, that concept here, let's bring the cursor up here, you can see it's that the rotation idea, that Rudolf Schriever took that concept of his. But bear in mind, Giuseppe Belluzzo also had that rotation, again, that spiral rotation effect around the cockpit. So moving on with Joseph Andres Epp, he claims to be a consultant of the flying disc program, and he knew of Otto Hobsbawm and Rudolf Schriever, that they had his plans and wanted to perfect it. So let's just play a clip of Joseph Andres Epp, and we're going to get into the photograph that he took. But also, before I mention, he did design a flying disc shaped craft called the Flying Target, which I'm going to grab it for you right now. And this links into more or less what the V7 is. Okay, so here's Joseph in his later on in its life. Now he's saying that the V7, remember I talked about this was the big discus craft that had the 12 BMW jet engines going around it, and that would cause the craft to lift off. Now he also mentions that that craft was taken off from his own model, which is called the Flying Target. But the only difference is that these are propellers and not jet engines, okay? And the cockpit is here, and also you got this flying around for extra propulsion. But that concept here wasn't drawn up until 1950s, because it's in his book. So either the drawing that I showed you from 1939, the one with the rotating circumference going around the flying disc, I think he means that. But there's some speculation in this book, is it's a bit odd. But this was never flown. This is just a model. And he said that actually flown successfully, but there's no photographs of the model in flight. So I think maybe take Joseph Andres Epp's story with a bit of pinch of salt. However, I got to show you this clip, and then we'll round up a conclusion. Because bear in mind, this is just a short dive into the Nazi flying saucer program. This is just like the tip of the iceberg. Wait until I go into massive amounts of detail. Okie dokie. So this is a documentary, Secrets of the Third Reich. And in here, we have an interview from Joseph Andres Epp. And this documentary came out in 1994. And let's continue.
Flying saucers, like the RFC-7.
The 26th Fighter Squadron had been ordered to fly from Kiel to Norway in order to resupply the 30 Fighter Squadron of the Bambach Command. On the return flight to Hamburg, I took a model of my aircraft design with me, and taking advantage of the opportunity, actually had it forwarded to Ernst Udet in the Reichs Air Ministry in Berlin.
Zum Abschicken zum Reichsluftfahrtministerium nach Berlin an Udet. Udet hat dieses Modell weitergegeben.
Udet passed this model on to the research establishment in Peenemünde, where tests were later carried out. Over and over again, I later heard reports from people who were working in Prague on the construction of flying discs, and progress in this field was actually being made. I also knew that Habermohl and Schriever were in possession of my model and had begun work on its practical applications.
Okay, so he mentioned Schriever and Habermohl there. Remember, those are the disc-shaped propellered fan aircraft. So he knew that they were involved in this program, and he said that they got his plans.
Und Schriever mein Modell praktisch bekommen hätten zum Ausarbeiten, zum Rekonstruieren. Und diese Flugscheibe hat der Schriever auf seine Art, seine Gedanken umgebaut. Während ich
Schriever made certain alterations to my plans, whereas, as I was later to ascertain, Habermohl had remained true to my original design. The second prototype was a flying disc, 42 meters long, and was built by Miete Beluzzo in Breslau.
So again, we have a mention of Dr. Richard Miete and Giuseppe Beluzzo.
Und zwar in Breslau. Und diese Flugscheibe sollte dann, wie ich dann erfahren habe, sollte dann nach Spitzbergen geflogen werden.
This flying disc, as I discovered, was flown to Spitzbergen in Norway and should have returned to Rechlin on a directional beam with an unknown transmission frequency and code word.
Für den Sender, nicht, was überhaupt gar nicht benutzt wurde von anderen, sollte auf diesen Richtstrahl die Flugscheibe.
However, due to a bad landing in Spitzbergen, it was damaged and was unable to complete the return flight home.
Die ist heftig abgestoßen und konnte dann nicht mehr zurückfliegen.
Okay. This is where it gets interesting. I don't find anyone in the UFO community talking about this photograph. Now, his story in his book, okay, I'm going to have to take it with a pinch of salt into the background of Joseph Andres Epp. And because he claims he was a consultant with the Rudolf Schriever, Otto Habermohl, Dr. Richard Miete, and Giuseppe Beluzzo program. But these are just claims. Okay, there's no actual real evidence, solid evidence whatsoever. However, I'm going to show you something like this actually vertically taken off. But what I would say in regards to Joseph Andres Epp's story is that he was saying that his plans were stolen, and on one specific day in February, sometime in February of 1945, I remember the time in February, that is when the V7 took off as well. So he was furious at the fact that Rudolf Schriever took his plans and advanced his detailed flying disc into his own operation, which turned out to be the first model of the Schriever, which was called the Flying Gyro, which was called the Flugkaiser. That's what Rudolf Schriever called his flying disc. So one day, Joseph Andres Epp was like, right, fuck this. I'm going down to Prague Airport, where they were testing these disc-shaped craft. Okay, and on his journey, he stops his car to check the maps for coordinates. And when he spotted something in the sky that he's never seen before, okay, let's bring up what he saw, because this is very interesting. Now, it's not the best photograph by any stretch of the imaginations when it comes to flying saucers. It's certainly not a dot, but here it is. Okay. This is the photograph he'd taken. And what we have here is the flying saucer he'd taken. In fact, no, what I'm going to do, I'm going to let him continue, because I've stopped him in his track and listen to his story.
After that, I drove into the hills just outside Prague. where the secret testing ground was supposed to have been located. I had my Leica A camera with me when suddenly I saw such a flying saucer. I was wounded at the time, so I know that it was November, December, although the test flight was not due to take place until the following February. Someone had made an unscheduled test flight, and this is what I saw coming towards me. It had no wings, absolutely none. I took a photo and wound on the film, but it was already directly over me. Then I took a second photo, and I could see that it was a flying gyroscope, a flying saucer.
Okay, right, I'm going to stop it there. So there you have it. Here we have an original photograph that he taken. Okay. See the little watermarks here? See the black sort of shading along here? That is the is water damage. Okay, so that's water damage. Let's I can't zoom in at all, but so you can say that this photograph is real. Let's look at the first one he'd taken.
Then I took a second photo, and I could see
let's
it was a
concentrate on the
flying
second one.
gyroscope, a flying saucer.
Okay. The first one I've got the photographs are in his book, but I just wanted to show you, look, he did take this photograph. Here is the original photo, and here's the watermark, because this is where it's going to get a bit sketchy. Not on Joseph Andrez's part, but on someone else's part, who is a UFO researcher that I've trusted for years, who've actually changed my mind about. So let's grab up that photograph. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that as the story from his mouth, Joseph's mouth, and his testimony, and the actual photograph as well. Because we've got a lot of hearsay stuff in the UFO community, but he's got a photograph to back it up, original one. So here it is. This is a copy from his book. So you can see we've got the landscape at the bottom. Now pay attention to the trees. But before we do, let's just look at this flying saucer. Okay. Now remember I was saying about the V7. This was the BMW jet engines going around, which was a discus-shaped aircraft. Now, if we say that this is real and this is a German flying saucer, zoom in a bit. I mean, the discus, the V7, do you think it kind of looks like that, or looks like the Haunebu flying saucer? It's a tricky one, isn't it? Let's bring up the V7. This is the V7 that was allegedly tested in February of 1945. Okay, remember that. Even in a documentary, and even George Klein mentioned that, which he's probably mostly talking about the V7. This here, okay, which wasn't anti-gravity. Obviously, these were BMW jet engines, turbojet engines that will force this craft up. This is just a artist's impression. It's not what the actual real thing looks like. Let's move on to Joseph Andres Epps' photograph. I remember the Haunebu. I've been showing you a lot of the Haunebu flying saucers anyway, like the brim of the hat. It kind of looks like a Haunebu. And going back to the photograph that was taken in America, in Ohio, that looked like a brim of a hat with a bloody gun turret underneath it. But what are the bloody odds, right? That Joseph took his car out into Prague, where they were testing these flying saucers, because they're testing the turbine-driven aircraft. I should have mentioned this earlier. They were testing it in Prague airport, okay? And so this is just a copy of the real photograph. Now, this is where it gets a bit, I'm going to grab a book here. If you want great UFO photographs, like old vintage photographs, get this. UFO Photographs Volume 1. And there's a UFO researcher called Randall Stevens. Now, he was connected into the Billy Meyer case. Okay, and I know that he's a bloody fraud anyway. And you got another author called August Roberts. But in here, you have so many photographs of old vintage flying saucers, and yes, you got Billy Meyer photographs in here. Let's just bring up a good like 1950s. Okay, July the 29th, 1952. Ignore the date because I'm going to debunk a lot of stuff into this. But look, these beautiful, I love these photographs. I really do. All these vintage flying saucers from the 1950s. Again, you know, it's clearly on string and it's fun, man. You know, 1950s, you know, UFOs was like a, that's definitely a bloody ashtray. It was like a new phenomena. It was, everyone was getting excited because they had nothing else better to fucking do. You know, the war's just ended. And now we got these bloody flying saucers flying about. So yeah, anyway, moving on. This photograph in here is from this book. Let's just zoom in. Remember the trees? And the flying saucer? There was no much on the background here. But when I saw this picture, I thought, hold on a bloody minute. I've seen this photograph somewhere before. Now, let's just go down to the description and read what it says. 29th of August, 1962. This was taken in Torino, whatever. It was basically taken in Italy, all right? And it was in 1962, okay? But that looks very much like the Joseph Andres Epp photograph because I'm going by these tree lines here. Now let's compare them together. Oh, this is the original photograph. This is the first one he taken, okay? And we're looking at the second photograph, which is this one here. But if we put those two together, yeah, I've got it here. Right, fantastic, brilliant. So on the left here is Epps, and here is from the UFO book, UFO Photographs Volume 1, which came out in the 1980s, by the way. Now, have a little look at this. I'm going by what the tree line here says, okay? So we have... Oh, this bloody cursor thing's in the way. So we've got the three... Oh, my thing's in the way. Hold on. There we go. All right, cool. We'll do it like that. Because you need to see this. So right here is the tree lines, okay? They almost match, don't they? They almost match. So actually, I'm honestly saying that this is actually a copy of the photograph. Because look at this. See the edges there? And you see this there? See what I mean? It almost matches. It almost just blackens it out a bit more. See the bit up there? Same again here. You got the 3 bits as well. Look. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And if we zoom out, and if we look at the craft as well, now remember there's no water damage. I think the water damage happened later on in the career. But if you have a look, oh, hold on. If you have a look here. Right, that's his. That's Epps. And that is that one there. Almost looks the same. In fact, they are the same. In my opinion. So someone's lying here. And I don't think it's Epp. I think it's Randall Stevens. So Randall, I think you got a lot of explanation to do there, buddy. I don't think anyone else is clocked onto this photograph. I mean, kind of looking at it, it kind of looks a bit different. But if you look at that tree line, it looks so exact, you know? Yeah, it's a tricky one. But going back to Joseph Andres Epp photo, I think what he taken that day, which is that, I think that's a real Nazi flying saucer. Whether or not it's the Haunaboo or the Vril or the turbine-driven aircraft. Because you all think he was in Prague. That's where he'd taken a photograph. And it was in 1945. However, I just realised something. Hold on a minute. If that was in 1945, right, how come there's leaves on these trees? Maybe it was probably earlier than that, of 44. But out of all the flying saucers I looked at, the Nazi flying saucers, I could honestly say that looked like the bloody Houndaboo. Whether or not it had a bloody gun turret underneath it or not. Again, guys, this is just Joseph Andre Depp's story. This is something that gets overlooked in the UFO community. This photograph. You've seen he's got the original photograph. This is a copy of it in his book. And we found a copy in another book that says it was taken in a different place in Italy, when we know that this photograph was taken in Germany by Epp himself. So there we go. That's Joseph Andre Depp's story. He died in 1997, bitter and alone. Yeah, quite sad story, really. And I think he wanted to get taken a bit more seriously. But unfortunately, it didn't really caught on. I mean, when it comes to Nazi flying saucers, it's always a bit sketchy anyway when it comes to any sort of information that comes out. But here we go, guys. That's I think, my opinion, that's a real photograph. Whether or not it's a bloody alien spacecraft, Nazi flying saucer, who bloody knows? Who knows? All we can do is to speculate, because that's ufology, isn't it? If you've been in ufology for about 5 years, you know it's just a bunch of hearsay, claims and testimonies, and not a lot of evidence, unless you just got like photographs and video footage of balls of light. So yeah, that's now have I got anything to add? Yeah, or conclusion. Let's round everything up into one big circle, because I will do a proper deep dive into the separate programs. In fact, just go back to the original title or the source of this video is down to John Warner. He said whether or not if there was anything, a program going dating back from Igor Wachowski's book from 1990 all the way from like the war, well, at the end of World War II. So yeah, I hope that sort of clear things up. It's all a bit muddled. I just went for it. I just put the photographs in there. I just went all from mind. I didn't have anything planned out. I needed to put a video out there for you guys. It's been a while. So should we play some clips or no? Let's just do. See what we got. Oh, I tell you what. To round it off, we'll play one clip. So let's get back to the original question. So yes, there's no evidence to back anything up, but there's claims of the turbine-driven aircraft from 1941 to 45 by the Rudolf Schriever Otto Huber Moore projects and the engineers that go with that. And then you've got the speculation of the Vril Society, the Vril Society in 1971. So you've got all these little bits popping up, and then you got the Nazi UFO secret weapon book, which is the blueprint of the Victor Schauberger mixing into the esoteric side, and then you've got the turbine-driven aircraft blueprints, which are all in this book. So Ernest Udall, the author of this book, essentially is just taken stories from what you talked about the newspaper articles from Rudolf Schriever and Giuseppe Belluzzo and George Klein, and he's just added it into this book, and he's added Victor Schauberger in there, and it's just like the beginning of adding the conspiracy within the conspiracy. And then you got decades later when you have you got the Vril Project by Norbert Jorgen Rathofer and Ralph Ettel, the two Austrians, which I can't find any information about them on the internet whatsoever. And they co-wrote the two documentaries that came out in 1990 and 1991, which was basically, so this book and the two documentaries link into one in that time period in the early 90s. And this is where you get the Maria Orsic, the Vril Society, the Sisters, and the Houndaboo and Vril flying saucers. And now I've got to round this up. Vril, Houndaboo, flying saucers, there is no mention of them from 1945, from the end of the war, until 1989. The only time you know about Houndaboo flying saucers is when the Vril Project came out, and those two documentaries came out at the same time, which those two Austrians co-wrote together. They were the blueprint, guys. This is what they were, the creation of the esoteric knowledge of the Nazi flying saucers. In my opinion, it sounds like a load of bollocks. If you read through this book, it's just time machines, and it sounds like a load of nonsense. I mean, I need to look into it properly, but I just like a bit of evidence to back things up, especially when it comes to psychics and stuff like that, and communicating with alien races, 60 million light years away. And also going back to this book here, remember I showed you the original one back in 1971 when this book came out. There was no mention of How Naboo flying saucers. This came out in 2008, and where the book stops in the original is this there, from page 165. That is the stop part of the book, but it's got an extra 10 pages, and I'm going, I wonder what they got in here. And you won't bloody believe what they got in here. Look, Vril, How Naboo flying saucers again. So again, it's just adding layer upon layer upon layer of conspiracies. Again, more How Naboo flying saucers. You see what I mean? And this is what's happening with people who just want to sell books. You've got the blueprints in here. Excuse me, God, that made me cough. Hitler shaking hands with a bloody alien. Come on. It's adding layers and layers onto a conspiracy. That was a conspiracy theory. It's the same thing with chemtrails. You'll ask a chemtrail believer, what's a chemtrail? Oh, it's to block out the sun. Oh, it's for 5G. It's for HARP. It's for weather modification. It's for making the atmosphere more breathable for the reptilians to live in. It's just a conspiracy within the conspiracy. And it's exactly the same with the Nazi flying saucers. If you go back in time, when what I've done with the original saucer, with the books I've got, is a timeline, and it's putting the puzzle pieces together. And this is what people don't really do when they're basing your research on the internet. You ain't going to get the answers. You might get a little bit, but you ain't going to get the true answers. And what I've done is broken the puzzle pieces down and putting it back together. And I've broken it down again and put it back together to sort of double fact check myself. Because I'm fact checking. I hate that fucking word anyway. Can't stand it. But that's what I've done. I'm not saying everything is gospel, but I've spent a lot of time researching, and I'm still continuing to research. And I've got another book from Germany coming up. I mean, I bought this book the other day. Where was it? It was from Finland. There you go. It's got the V7 on it. And guess what? It's got no bloody Nazi flying saucers in it. Bloody Finland. Bloody, damn it. But anyway, that is part of research. So I want to do a bit more of a deep dive into it, but I hope this is just a bit more detail and a basic background into the How Naboo and Vril and where the story originated from, because I keep hearing the esoteric side being pushed as true fact. And Joseph P. Farrell, which brilliant book. He's got a book here called SS of. I've got your books there, Joseph, if you're watching. But he doesn't believe in How Naboo flying saucers. Here's what don't make sense to me. I've got some conclusions here. One of the problems I have when it comes to anti-gravity technology being brought over to Germany into the United States, if the Americans had that technology perfected, why do they need to research into anti-gravity technology in the 50s? Michael Schratt is, I think, one of the best researchers when it comes to like Lockheed Martin technology and technology that the military has that we don't know about. And I know for a goddamn fact that they got technology far, far beyond our capability. And yeah, I'm going there as like teleportation and invincibility and invisibility, not invincibility, invisibility and stuff like that. But I'm just going to play a clip right here from Michael Schratt and Jordan Maxwell. Jordan Maxwell passed away last year, absolutely gutted. He's a hero of mine, and I don't care what anyone says, but he's a fantastic researcher into the esoteric. I mean, this was before David Icke. In fact, Jordan Maxwell actually brought David Icke over into America. But yeah, if you've got a chance, check out Jordan Maxwell.
I want to give my sources here. Amarillo Daily News, November 26, 1955. So it's November 26, 1955. Here's what they said. Quote, aircraft industry firms now participating or actively interested in gravity include the Glenn L. Martin Company of Baltimore, Convair of San Diego, Bell Aircraft of Buffalo, New York, Sikorsky Division of United Aircraft, Lear Incorporated of Santa Monica, Clark Electronics of Palm Springs, and Sperry Gyroscope of Great Neck, Long Island. So, Jordan, by 1955, they were already working on anti-gravity technology. They had already got the ball rolling on this. So no doubt about it.
So there we go, Michael Schrapp. Love to get him on my show and have an interview with him. But again, here we go, guys. There's more evidence of they did try to develop anti-gravity. Whether or not they're successful or not, your guess is probably good as mine if you've done more research into it. But absolutely, I reckon they have cracked anti-gravity. But it makes no sense. I mean, they would have why all these institutions making, wasting taxpayers' money on developing anti-gravity when the Germans had it and allegedly brought it over from the United States. And saying that, let's play a clip from our good friend. Not really. His name's Greer. Stephen Greer. A final roundup for today's video, ending with good old Stephen Greer. Whether you like him or not, great storyteller, in my opinion. And we will leave it as that. So let's put him on big screen, as he likes to be on a pedestal, and let's click play. Because he talks about some sort of disc being brought over from Germany to America. Let's click play.
We do know that Paul Mellon, the grandfather of John Warner IV, who is here today, went over and retrieved.
Okay, John Warner IV is the guy I'm talking about today in this episode, okay?
A German disc at the end of World War II that was their prototype to develop a so-called anti-gravity electromagnetic gravitic system, but it wasn't fully operational by the time the war ended. But that became something that then was pursued later through operations that were highly classified in the United States and in the very black aerospace world. And we have this very well documented, by the way. This was a great deal of history here of the United States and after World War II that the public doesn't know about, but it'll come out. Other questions?
There we go. Straight from the horse's mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it. This is my short presentation, and I mean short presentation. It might be 3 hours long, I think, this episode. But yeah, it's been fun. This is just like a brief background into where the stories originated from, because I keep on hearing the Nazi flying saucers and the esoteric sign being brought up as true. I'm not ruling it out, but it just, if you do a deep dive into it, which I will do a proper deep dive, it just sounds a bit nonsense. Okay, sounds a bit. I'm a woohoo conspiracy theorist myself. Okay, I put my hand up, I will admit to that. But this just sounds a bit too far-fetched. And again, if the Germans did build anti-gravity flying saucers and it did brought over to America, if we go on what Stephen Greer says, that this was a non-functioning prototype, then what the hell did Joseph von Josep take a picture of? Possibly an alien spacecraft? Who knows? Who knows? But anyway, guys, I promise in 2024, more content will be released from me. I'm going to do a mixture of conspiracy theories, add a bit of ghost paranormal stuff in there as well. But I'm going to be on the ball with it. And it's going to be fun. So 2024 will be a bright new year for content. And we're going to see what happens to ufology. So you can find me on Alien Addict on every Friday with my good friend Ice Cream from Terrestrial Materials. Plus, you can find an interview on me on Terrestrial Materials YouTube page. I've gone on too long, man. I'm slurring my words here. So Terrestrial Materials, I'll put the link in the description. You can find me. I'll just do a brief background into the Nazi flying saucer programs. About 2 hours long. And I did the same on Alien Annex channel as well. So guys, like and subscribe and all that bloody malarkey. And I shall see you very soon. And have a happy new year. And don't get too drunk like I'm going to be. See you soon.